Am I wrong for refusing to come clean and potentially ruining my ex-husband's marriage? I'm 42 and divorced my ex-husband Brad, who's also 42, after finding out he was cheating on me with his now wife Jessica, who's 30. It happened a few years back, and instead of confronting him immediately, I decided to be strategic about it. I started digging and eventually found a clear trail that led me straight to Jessica. I was furious and hurt, but I kept my cool. Rather than making a scene, I collected evidence. I even found Jessica on social media and joined one of her online groups. We had similar interests, so it wouldn't look suspicious if either of them found out. I just played it smart, waiting for the right time. While I prepared my exit, I convinced Brad to pay for a certification course so I could get a better job. Meanwhile, I kept track of his secret expenses, hotel bookings, gifts, and trips, all under an account I had access to because I knew him well enough to guess his passwords. During this time, I also moved some of my belongings out of the house without him noticing and got him to take his name off my car. When everything was in place, I handed him the divorce papers at the very hotel where he was waiting for Jessica. I had photos of them together and showed him a few, leaving no room for denial. Brad was up for a promotion at work, so I gave him an option. Either we settled the divorce quietly, or I could stir things up and risk him losing his job. He agreed to a swift, no-drama divorce, since I made it clear I didn't want alimony or his retirement savings. We split, and shortly after, Jessica got pregnant, and they got married. Jessica always irritated me, but since my kids didn't seem bothered by her, I tolerated her. Recently, however, Jessica publicly criticized my parenting because my child didn't perform well in school. She claimed she'd raise her child to be smarter. I was furious and, in the heat of the moment, told a lie. I said it wasn't very smart of her to tip me off about the affair. I implied that Jessica had sent me photos and details about when and where she and Brad would meet up. Brad wasn't there, but his mom and sister were. He called me that night, curious about how I had found out. Instead of telling the truth, I doubled down on my lie. For some reason, Brad asked if I could keep the kids for the entire summer, which I agreed to in exchange for having them for Christmas. I later heard that Brad and Jessica didn't have a great summer, and now Jessica keeps messaging me nonstop. But unless it's about my kids, I'm not responding. I told my brother what happened, and he said that while my actions were understandable, it wasn't right to lie. But honestly, I don't care about Jessica or Brad. So, am I wrong for lying? Next story. Am I wrong for not sharing my inheritance with my stepsisters? I'm 18 now, but this all started when I was 16. My parents split up about 2 years ago. Nothing dramatic. The marriage just wasn't working. My mom remarried, and now I have 2 stepsisters. My dad stayed single. On my dad's side, my granddad is getting up there in age, and he decided to draft his will. He made it clear that he wanted to make sure I'd be okay long term, so he set up a trust fund for me, with my dad as the trustee. I won't have access to it until I graduate college, but I know it's in the 6 figures. Granddad made it clear that since I'm his only grandchild, and we're close, he wanted me to have the money. My dad's the only other person in line for anything, so all of this was planned out a while ago, and I was content with it. I live half the time with my mom and half with my dad, and I get along okay with my stepsisters. We're not super close, but there's no bad blood. We're just not really like siblings. Recently, my mom found out about my trust fund, and she and my stepdad sat me down to talk. They suggested that since I'm getting this large amount of money, I should share it with my stepsisters. Their reasoning, we're all family now, and it wouldn't be fair for me to have all this while they get nothing. They said it could help with their college costs since they're not in the best financial situation. I understand where they're coming from, but this money is from my granddad, who has no obligation to my stepsisters. He wanted me to have it, and it feels wrong to go against his wishes. Plus, I can't even touch the money until after I graduate, so it's not like I could use it for their college now, even if I wanted to. By the time I can access it, they'll probably already be done with school. My mom and stepdad are upset, saying I'm being selfish for not sharing and that I'm not thinking about the family, but I don't feel like it's fair for them to ask me to give away something that was never meant for anyone but me. My granddad is really clear on this. When I told him and my dad, they were furious. My granddad even called my mom and stepdad to tell them the trust fund is for me and me alone. He also warned them not to expect anything. Now I'm conflicted. I don't want to hurt my stepsisters. They don't even know this is happening. But at the same time, this money was left to give me a head start after college, and if I pay for their school, I'll be left with almost nothing. My mom and stepdad have been giving me the cold shoulder since, and I'm starting to wonder if I should reconsider. I don't want to ruin my relationship with my mom and her new family, but I also feel like my granddad's wishes should be respected. Next story. Am I wrong for refusing to replace my son's car, even if it means he cuts us off? My son Jordan, who's 18, spent about a year saving up for a better car than we could afford to buy him within our family budget. My other son Noah, who's 17 and has ADHD, just got his driver's license recently and asked if he could drive Jordan's car. Jordan agreed, but Noah ended up getting into a pretty bad accident about 6 months ago. The car was wrecked beyond repair, and the insurance payout wasn't enough to replace it. On top of that, we had Noah's medical bills to worry about. Thankfully, it was just a broken arm and leg and no permanent damage. We couldn't afford to replace Jordan's car right away. Noah was genuinely sorry, and so were we, but Jordan wasn't having it. He refused to accept any apologies and has been avoiding us ever since. He skips family dinners and barely speaks to anyone except when he needs something for school. I begged him to come to family therapy, and he finally agreed, with the condition that Noah wouldn't be there. During the session, Jordan made it clear that he wouldn't resume any sort of relationship with us until we replaced his car. When the therapist asked how he expected us to do that, Jordan suggested that Noah should work to pay for it. But here's the problem. Noah's ADHD is pretty severe, and he already struggles to keep up with school. I'm worried that forcing him to take on a job will hurt his grades and impact his future. Jordan's response? He should have thought about that before crashing my car. I don't care. I'm not talking to any of you until my car is replaced. I told him that he's free to avoid speaking to me for as long as he wants, but I'm not going to jeopardize Noah's future just to get him a new car sooner. My wife agrees with me, but she's also terrified that Jordan will never speak to us again. I get that he's upset about losing the car, but as a parent, I have to look out for both of my kids, not just one. I also don't want to set the example that emotional manipulation will get you what you want, especially if what you're asking for isn't reasonable. My brother revealed a shocking secret about my late fiancé, and now I don't know what to believe. About a month ago, my fiancé, 29, tragically passed away in a car accident. I'm 26, and we had been planning our wedding for September of this year. Everything seemed perfect. We were even looking to buy a house together next year. But then my entire world crumbled. His death left me in pieces, and I've barely been able to function. For weeks, I stayed in bed, avoiding everyone and drowning my grief in sleep and the occasional drink. Today, though, my friends finally convinced me to step outside. I wasn't exactly excited, but I needed it. We hung out, and for the first time since his death, I actually smiled. But when I got home, I walked into something I never could have imagined. My brother, 23, was standing in my living room, wearing my wedding dress. Tears were streaming down his face as music played softly in the background. The moment he saw me, he screamed for me to leave, but I refused. I demanded an explanation, and that's when he broke down and confessed something that shattered my heart even more. Before my fiancé's death, they had been having an affair. My brother claimed they were planning to run away together before the wedding. As soon as he said those words, I felt like the room was spinning. I had a full-blown panic attack and ran to my bedroom, locking the door. He tried to explain further, but what else was there to say? I feel nauseous just writing this. I don't want to see him, talk to him, or even think about him. I've been crying nonstop ever since. This year has been the worst of my life, and I have no idea what to do. How am I supposed to move on from this?